You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and let me tell you what I'm not going to do on this show before we get into the big news. I'm not going to talk about the NFL opt-outs. Basically because I don't know where the story is. Should they opt out? Yes. I don't blame a player for opting out. How is the team going to recover? They're not. They're going to be worse. Doesn't matter who it is. If you were slated to have a meaningful role on the team, of course you're going to be worse off without him. I don't care who it is. If it's a quarterback that opts out, like a starting quarterback, okay, that's a big story. I'll talk about that. But these guys like Nate Solder and Damian Williams and Marquise Goodwin, where's the story? There's some Giants fans that are really happy that they're not going to see Solder this year. Damian Williams leaving makes Clyde Edwards-Helaire a fantasy football darling, as he should be. Take him in the first round, I'll tell you right now. He's going to have a fantastic season. And Marquise Goodwin really impacts the Eagles. They don't have any wide receivers. We knew that. It's Jalen Reagor and a bunch of scrubs. You know, it's again, where's the story? I'm not going to talk about something if there's not a story. I don't even like talking about injuries. How is the team going to move on from this? Well, they're not. If it's a star player that gets hurt, they're just not going to recover from it. So that's all I'm going to say about it. Unless it's a starting quarterback, I'm not going to talk about it. I will talk about these ridiculous MLB rule changes that are being floated about. And this is not official, thank God. But these are ideas that are out there. And they're actually being considered. The union requested them, and the league is considering them. Teams will be allowed to have 30 men on their roster throughout the season. It was supposed to go from 30 to 28 to 26 gradually. Now it's staying at 30 throughout the year, according to this proposal. And if double headers are played, you'll have 2 7-inning games, or 1 9-inning game, and 1 7-inning game. I don't mind the 30-man active roster. I really don't. I understand the fact that you need as many players up here as possible. If it's one person being out with the coronavirus, okay. You know, that's not a huge deal. Obviously, depending on who the player is. But from a roster standpoint, you can find someone to replace him pretty easily. If it's 2 or 3 or 4, yeah, you're going to have a tough time with that. Or at least a tougher time with that. So I don't hate the idea of having as many people traveling with you as possible. I understand that it's harder. I understand you have more people to protect. I get all that, but from a baseball standpoint, it makes sense. The 7-inning stuff is ridiculous, and if we're going to do that, can we please just cancel the season? Okay? We've already made this game a joke. We've already made this season a farce. The World Series winner is gonna have an asterisk. Okay? It's just that simple. It's always been 9 innings. Always. Except for weather. Games are 9 innings. Do not make it 7. Why stop at 7 then? Why not go to 6 or 5? Or you know what? Let's not even make it just for double headers. Let's do it for every game this season. It's just going to be 7 innings. Let's get rid of the bullpen entirely. A guy like Garrett Cole or Jacob deGrom or Steven Strasburg, assuming he comes back healthy, they're going to have a dozen complete games. It's going to be like old-time baseball. It's a joke. It doesn't work. You can't do that. You've already sullied this season enough with 60 games and the stupid runner on second rule in extra innings and all the other stuff you have going on. The expanded playoffs. I mean, come on, this isn't softball. This isn't Little League. This is Major League Baseball. I'm telling you, there's a part of me that just doesn't want the Yankees to win it all this year. Don't have that asterisk. It's not like I'm going to root against them, but look, I'm not going to be as upset if they lose this year as I was last year. I mean, one thing I'll tell you, with all these changes being bandied about, I don't know how much baseball I'm going to watch when hockey comes back. There's going to be hockey playoffs up the wazoo starting on Saturday. The NBA is coming back, obviously, tonight with the seeding games. But that, to me, is like the regular season. I don't have a burning desire to watch that unless it's my team. But when it comes to the playoffs, yeah, I'm going to watch it in the NHL and I'm going to watch it in the NBA. I'm having a really tough time figuring out if I'm going to watch the Yankees or not when these playoffs hit. What would I rather watch? The Stanley Cup playoffs, which don't have an asterisk. I think the NHL has done this perfectly with the coronavirus. I mean, really, job well done by Commissioner Bettman. I don't like what happened with the draft lottery, but when it comes to the playoffs, I don't mind it. And the NBA, once we get to those playoffs, I'm going to have a real tough time watching the Yankees. I'm just going to have a real tough time getting into baseball this year. Major League Baseball is trying to get a season done at all costs. It shouldn't be that. I understand why you want a season. You gotta bring in as much money as possible. I'm not begrudging you for that. And now that you've started, you really can't stop. It'll be the biggest tease since the last time I went to a strip club. Oh, that's terrible. I hope my parents don't listen to this episode. But the integrity of the game has to come before everything. If you can't have a season without violating what makes baseball baseball, for my money, the greatest game on earth. It's my favorite sport. It's not hockey, it's not football, it's not basketball. It's baseball. Then why did you even have a season? More to the point, why are you doing this in the middle of the season? You can't introduce new rules in the middle of a season. That doesn't work for me. I don't care what the rule is. Active roster, innings, I don't care. That doesn't work for me. Do you remember the first XFL, the 2001 XFL? They changed the rules in the middle of the season. There's a reason it only lasted 1 year. It's such a Bush League move to change rules in the middle of a season. I'm telling you, the fact that this is seriously being considered, the 7-inning games, I mean, look, even before this, I had a tough time figuring out how I was going to get into this season when hockey and basketball came back. Now, it's going to be very easy for me to turn off the Yes Network. Moving on now to college football. This has been a conversation for a while, but it's the first time that I'm talking about it because the ACC is going to have an 11-game football schedule to be played in the fall. Notre Dame will be in there. The SEC is considering something similar, obviously not with Notre Dame, but just in terms of it being conference only and shortened season. So that's why I'm talking about it now. I love college football. Like, once football season hits, don't talk to me on the weekend. Saturday, it's college football. Sunday, it's the NFL. Depending on if I like the Monday night game or not, I'll watch football on Mondays. I love football. And I love college football. I love watching these guys before they become stars in the NFL. But I just don't see how we can have college football this year. I just don't think it's going to work. This has nothing to do with the issue of putting students back in school. That's an entirely separate debate, and I don't envy the decision makers in that debate. I have no idea what I would do. I really see it both ways. For the college students and the high school students, it's a little easier to transition to online classes. But for middle school and below, that's not going to work. Or at least it's not going to work for everyone. There are going to be a lot of kids left behind. But I understand that you need to keep them safe, obviously. I really don't know what the right decision is. I see it both ways. But college football has nothing to do with that debate. How can you have these games safely? How can you have these teams traveling from state to state? You're going to have Notre Dame, which is in South Bend, Indiana, traveling to South Carolina, Florida, and Virginia. Just to name a few. We've seen it with Major League Baseball. We can't do that. That can't be done safely. You're going to have another Miami Marlins situation. You just are. And I've been a big proponent of having bubbles. I see it working with soccer. I see it working with basketball. I see it working with hockey. But you can't do that in college football. There's no way that can be done. You have too many conferences. You have too many teams. Even if you just limit it to the Power 5 conferences, which is ridiculous to start with, but even if the NCAA said, we're just going to have college football for the 5 power conferences, how are you going to do that? Where are you going to find the fields? Do you have any idea how many people are on a college football roster? Not to mention coaches? You can't put them all in hotels. There's no way you can do a bubble for college football. It just can't be done. So you're left with two choices. Either no bubble and try to play a season, or just cancel the season outright. I understand that the NCAA has lost a lot of money this year. No March Madness. Alright, that's a financial blow that they're going to have a real tough time recovering from. And can you imagine no college football? Same thing. But I just don't think you can have a conference-only schedule be done safely. You want to tell me it's limiting travel? Okay, fine. That's the same argument that Major League Baseball used. Look where it got the Marlins. Oh, but Jacob, that's an outlier. Look at the 29 other teams. They're all fine. Well, yeah, you're right that they're all fine. Yeah, the Marlins are an outlier. But it's a real possibility that it can happen again. That's the thing. I'm trying to avoid getting people sick. I don't want people to get this horrible disease that even if they're asymptomatic now, we have no idea what's going to happen to them long term. We all know that Kevin Durant had the coronavirus. Nothing scares me more than the thought that it can negatively affect him next season and the season after. I just don't see how you can do college football this year. And even if you're limiting it to just the Power 5 conferences, let's say that the NCAA figures out a way to do it. I don't know how, but let's say they do. What about the non-Power 5 conferences? They're going to be screaming bloody murder. And they'd have a huge argument for it. What about the D2 schools or the D3 schools? There's no way you can do it. You cannot have a bubble in college football. And that's the only way to get a season done now. Until we get a vaccine, I don't see how you can have teams travel. Major League Baseball teams right now are playing Russian roulette. And these NFL teams are going to be playing Russian roulette also. The same thing for some college football teams. Because we've already seen the Ivy League drop out. And we've seen some conferences move to spring football. I mean, I don't know how you're going to do bowl games. With some conferences in the fall, others in the spring. How's that going to work? How are you going to do bowl games? You want to tell me you don't care about the minor bowl games? Okay, fine. But you can still be in a situation where you have one conference like the ACC ending in the fall and another one like the Big 10 or the Big 12, whatever, ending in the spring. That's going to affect the major bowl games. It just is. I don't see how we're going to have college football this season. I just don't. And I have no idea what that means for the players. Guys like Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. And guys like that. The ones who are trying to make it into the NFL. Maybe what you could do is talk to the NFL Draft Advisory Board, which is a panel of scouts that advises college prospects on if they should go pro or stay in school. Maybe what you do is you talk to them, you get a list of all the people that they think would be draft picks in 2021. I'm not even saying high draft picks. I'm just saying draft picks. You do a bubble with them. You have them play some games, and I don't even know if you keep standings or not. Maybe you keep stats. But they need to have a chance to show what they can do. Just imagine a guy like Trevor Lawrence getting the coronavirus. How much is that going to affect his chances of going pro? I think that could cause him to slip a lot. And it would be so unfair to him. With a bubble, I'm not saying you're not going to get the coronavirus. Because we don't know. We've still got to let this play out. But you're a lot less likely to get it. That's the only way you can have college football this year. And I'm not sure how feasible it is. I think we're looking at no college football this year. And it kills me to say it. Moving on now to my new favorite Dodger, Joe Kelly. He was suspended for 8 games. Dave Roberts got a game, and Dusty Baker got fined. And look, we all knew that Kelly was gonna get suspended. You had to know that Major League Baseball wasn't gonna like what he did. But to give him 8 games, I mean, that's ridiculous. That's the equivalent of a 22-game suspension in a 162-game season. That is absurd. I'd have given him, 3 games if I was Manfred. If I was in charge, I'd build a statue for Joe Kelly. I love Joe Kelly. I love what he did. And I don't mind Major League Baseball punishing him, but 8 games? The equivalent of 22? In this crazy shortened season? That's ridiculous. Joe Kelly is getting punished more than the Astros players. Think about that. You know what? Quite honestly, if I was set to face the Astros this year, and I knew I was going to get an 8-game suspension, this season's a farce anyway. I'd throw at him every chance I get. If Major League Baseball isn't going to punish the Astros players for what they did, it's up to the players to do it. There's nothing wrong with frontier justice. And you want to tell me that Joe Kelly wasn't on the 2017 Dodgers and he was on the 2018 Red Sox, so he has no right to be upset? No, that's nonsense. That's utter nonsense. I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of Major League Baseball players are still upset at the Astros. Maybe not the organization, but the players. They got off scot-free in exchange for them telling Manfred exactly what happened. We can argue for time immemorial about whether that was the right decision or not. I understand why Manfred did it. But with that decision to give them immunity comes the fact that they're going to get retribution inflicted upon them on the field. You had to know that was a possibility. And your response is to punish this guy for 8 games? The equivalent of 22 in a 162-game season? That's absurd. God almighty, do I hate Rob Manfred. What a joke he is. Without question, the worst commissioner in the 4 major sports. You want to tell me it's not fair to look at this from a proportion standpoint? No, of course it is. We have to look at this from a proportion standpoint. You can't look at this from a 60-game standpoint. The 60-game season is an outlier. We're never going to see this again. Everything is going to be looked at through the lens of a 162-game season. Stats? Champions? Awards? Whatever. If Kelly were to be suspended 8 games in a 162-game season, that would be the equivalent of a 3-game suspension in a 60-game season. 3 games seems a little light. He had to know he was going to be suspended. We all knew he was going to be suspended. We can love him from now until the cows come home. But the simple fact is, he had to get punished. I don't know what the appropriate punishment was. A 5-game suspension in a 60-game season is the equivalent of a 13.5-game suspension in a 162-game season. That doesn't work for me. So I don't know what the right decision was, but I do know that 8 games is way too much. And Rob Manfred is nothing short of inept. There were 2 deaths in the sports world that need to be talked about. And that means no decades of dumbass decisions today. I'm not sure how I'm going to finish it. Maybe I'll finish everything tomorrow, depending on what breaks. Maybe I'll save it for later. I don't know. But I just can't do it today. It doesn't work. The first death that I want to talk about is Lou Henson. One of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. Yeah, he's not in the John Wooden and Mike Krzyzewski echelon, but he's probably in the echelon below them. That's how great he was. This guy turned around 2 programs. He turned them from jokers to really, really good schools. New Mexico State and Illinois. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. He started his coaching career in college at Hardin-Simmons University, which is in Texas. At the time, Hardin-Simmons was segregated. Henson said that he would take the job, but only if the team, and thus the school, would be racially integrated. The university agreed. Think about how powerful that is. Before he went to Hardin-Simmons, he was a high school coach at Las Cruces High School in New Mexico. You have a college taking a chance on you, and you say, great, I'll take the job, but you have to desegregate. Such a powerful statement from a great man. Great move by Henson. And he had a few good seasons at Hardin-Simmons, but then he made the jump to his alma mater, New Mexico State. In his 4th year there, New Mexico State made the Final Four. And they could have won the whole thing. They were that good. That New Mexico State team was a great team. They went 27-3. They just had the misfortune of running into one of John Wooden's great UCLA teams. But that team, led by Jimmy Collins, Sam Lacey, Jeff Smith, and Charlie Criss, that could have won the title. They were that good. They finished as the 3rd best team in the nation because they won a consolation game against St. Bonaventure for 3rd place. Kind of interesting that the NCAA did that. I'd actually like them to go back to that. Henson stuck around New Mexico State for 5 years after that, and then he made the jump to Illinois, a team that had really fallen on hard times. In the early 50s, they were great. They made 2 Final Fours. Without getting into it, Harry Combs did a fantastic job with them. But the school had really fallen on hard times. Henson took over, and it took him a while to really get going. He didn't finish with a winning record in the Big Ten until his 6th year at Illinois. I don't think he'd make it now. I think there would be too much of a call for his head. But give Illinois credit for sticking with him. From that year that they finished with the winning record, 80-81, they made the big dance every year with the exception of the 81-82 season, all the way until the 89-90 season. In that time, Henson coached 2 great teams. The 83-84 Illinois team won the regular season Big Ten title. They had a stifling defense that year. They only allowed 56 points per game. That was the 5th best total in the nation. And they had some great defenders, guys like Ephraim Winters, Bruce Douglas, and Doug Altenberger. It's okay if you don't know those names. They didn't make it in the pros, but they were really good college defenders. And that Illinois team came really close to knocking off Kentucky in the Elite Eight. If they had hit just 2 more shots, they would have beaten Kentucky. But they didn't. Kentucky won 54-51. I'll fast forward a little bit to 88-89, by far and away Henson's best season. Illinois went 31-5. And they had some great players that you'll know. Nick Anderson, former Magic. Kenny Battle. Kendall Gill, former Net. Lowell Hamilton was a good college player. Marcus Liberty, Steve Bardo, Larry Smith. These guys were really good college players. That Illinois team was a great team. And they came really close to beating Michigan in the Final Four game. They only lost by 2. 83-81. Just 1 more 3. And Illinois would have won. But Glenn Rice balled out in that game for the Wolverines. He had 28 points. Kenny Battle had a great game for the Fighting Illini. He was the high man with 29. Nick Anderson had a good game. Kendall Gill only attempted 9 shots. He should have had more. Steve Bardo should have given up some of those shots. After that, Illinois hung around in the playoffs, but they didn't make any other big runs. In the 97-98 season, New Mexico State came calling. Neil McCarthy was their head coach, but it had ended kind of poorly. He was a really good head coach there, but some of his assistants were helping the players on their exams. It got really bad. McCarthy was never cited as doing anything wrong personally, but he was cited for not controlling his staff. He was fired, and New Mexico State brought back Lou Henson. Henson wanted to coach for free, but state law didn't allow that, so he took a $1 per month salary. Unfortunately, New Mexico State never really had great teams his second time around. They made the big dance once in 98-99 after winning the Big West Conference tournament, but they were eliminated in the first round. The year after that, they made the NITs, but they were eliminated in the first round there. Henson hung around for 5 more years, but they never made another tournament. But that shouldn't put a damper on his legacy. He was elected to the College Basketball Hall of Fame in 2015. Very, very deservingly so. May he rest in peace. The other death that I want to talk about is John McNamara. Now, usually when I do these eulogies, I talk highly of the person. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. But John McNamara was not a good manager. And, look, I don't want to say he gets remembered as being a good manager, because the average baseball fan probably doesn't remember him. But I think he gets less blame than he should. This guy managed for 19 seasons. He only made the playoffs twice. In 1979 with the Reds, he got swept. He took over for Sparky Anderson. He led the Reds to the NLCS, but they got swept by the We Are Family Pirates. Then in 86, he managed the Boston Red Sox to within 1 win of a World Series. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to talk about his managerial career fully. He started as interim manager of the Oakland Athletics in 1969. He only managed 13 games. He went 8-5. That was enough for him to keep the job going into next season. They had a good season. They went 89-73. But Charlie Finley made the very wise decision to replace him with Dick Williams. And within 2 seasons, Dick Williams won a World Series with the Athletics, starting their three-peat. In 1974, McNamara started with the San Diego Padres. He was absolutely terrible. He never had a winning record. His best mark was in 1976, when he went 73-89. After that season, the Padres were very aggressive in free agency. They signed Rollie Fingers and Gene Tennis, 2 players that McNamara had managed with the Athletics, and they were expected to be really good in 77, but they floundered. They got off to a 20-28 start under McNamara. He was fired, and the Padres ultimately finished with a 69-93 record. Tennis was really not good for the Padres. He had 1 good season. That was pretty much it. He spent 4 seasons there. You've got to have more than 1 good season. Rollie Fingers had some good seasons. He spent 4 seasons there also. Only had 1 bad season. That was in 1979. Speaking of 1979, that's when McNamara took over the Cincinnati Reds. Sparky Anderson had been fired. He didn't want to fire anyone on his coaching staff. So that drove a wedge between Anderson and the front office, and they decided to hire John McNamara. That decision helped to hasten the Big Red Machine's demise. Like I said, they got swept in the 79 NLCS, and they wouldn't make the playoffs in the entire 1980s. But it's not like McNamara managed them for the entirety of that decade. He just started the decline. In 83 and 84, he was manager of the California Angels. The reason he got that job was because he had a really good relationship with their general manager, Buzzy Bavasi. Bavasi had hired McNamara as manager of the Padres, and McNamara did not do a good job with the Angels. In 82, the Angels came within one win of the pennant. They lost a heartbreaking Game 5 to the Brewers. Gene Mauch retired, McNamara was brought in, and they replaced one bad manager with another, as in 82, the Angels had won 93 games, but in 83, they dropped to only 70 wins. Then in 84, their record increased to 81 and 81, but Gene Mauch was ready to come back as manager of the Angels by then, and McNamara found his way to the Boston Red Sox. You gotta wonder how he kept getting opportunities. You want to talk about an old boys club? Holy moly, this was an old boys club. The only season worth talking about with McNamara and the Red Sox is 1986. And make no mistake about it, he had a great year that year. The Red Sox won 95 games. They won the pennant over his old team, the California Angels. See, think about that. The Angels didn't make the playoffs in McNamara's 2 years there. It took Gene Mauch just 2 years to get them back into the playoffs. And Gene Mauch wasn't a really good manager either, but I'll give him credit for what he did with the Angels. He was a really good manager there. Took him long enough, but he did eventually get there. So it had to feel really good for McNamara to beat the Angels in the 86 ALCS. The Red Sox destroyed them in Game 7, 8-1. Roger Clemens pitched a sensational game, 7 innings of 1-run ball. He only gave up 4 hits. He was insane. And then the Red Sox went on to face the New York Mets in the World Series. I'll fast forward to Game 6. The Red Sox are up 3-2. The game is tied at 3 at the end of 9 innings. So we go into extras. In the 10th inning, the Red Sox broke the game wide open. The second pitch that Rick Aguilera threw to Dave Henderson, he hit it out of the ballpark. The Red Sox then manufactured another run. So it was 5-3 Red Sox headed into the bottom of the 10th. Calvin Schiraldi on the mound. He gets Wally Backman and Keith Hernandez to fly out. The Red Sox are 1 out away from winning the World Series. Gary Carter hits a single. He keeps the Mets alive. Kevin Mitchell hits a single. Runners on first and second, 2 out. Ray Knight falls behind Schiraldi, 0-2. The Red Sox are 1 strike away from winning the World Series. Schiraldi gives up an 0-2 single to score Gary Carter. So the Mets pull within 1. McNamara replaces Schiraldi with Bob Stanley. You gotta wonder what took him so long. It's a 3-2 count. Again, one strike away from winning the World Series. Stanley throws a wild pitch. Kevin Mitchell scores, tie game. I hope you know what happened next. Mookie Wilson hits a ground ball down the first base line that goes through Bill Buckner's legs. Ball game over, Mets win one of the most improbable games in World Series history. And Bill Buckner got a lot of heat for that. The guy got death threats. He had to move to Boise, Idaho to get out of Boston when he retired. It wasn't until the Red Sox won in 2004 that he was welcomed back by the city. But Buckner should have never been in that situation. Buckner, by then, his knees were shot. Everyone knew his knees were shot. In fact, late in games, McNamara replaced Buckner at first base with Dave Stapleton. Stapleton was a really good fielding first baseman. McNamara didn't do it in Game 6. If Dave Stapleton is at first base, we have an 11th inning, and God only knows what happens. McNamara later said that he wanted to have Buckner on the field to celebrate. That is a bunch of nonsense. There were two other decisions made in that game that don't get talked about a lot. Roger Clemens was dealing through 7 innings. Only gave up 4 hits. He allowed 2 runs to score, but only one of them was earned. Clemens had developed blisters on his pitching hand. But again, he was dealing. It's Game 6 of the World Series. If your pitcher is dealing, leave him in. If he's not in pain, leave him in. McNamara pulls him for Schiraldi. McNamara later said that Clemens wanted out. Clemens vehemently denies that. And the Red Sox trainer at the time, the same guy who came up with that stupid fix for Curt Schilling's foot, supports Clemens. Moreover, McNamara replaced Clemens via a pinch hitter. The pinch hitter was Mike Greenwell. The Red Sox were up 3-2 at this point. 1 out, Dave Henderson on second base. If the Red Sox score 1 more run, that's it. The game doesn't go into extra innings. Mike Greenwell, that season, was a nobody. He turned into a good player, but no one knew anything about him. In the World Series, he was only hitting .200. McNamara had Don Baylor on the bench. Now, granted, he wasn't having a good World Series either, but he was a better choice than Mike Greenwell. Mike Greenwell was not a power hitter. He developed a little power later on, but in 1986, Don Baylor, as the Red Sox's primary designated hitter, had hit 31 home runs. Don't you want him in instead of Greenwell? Why doesn't that get talked about? Why don't those decisions get talked about? McNamara was inept. Nothing short of inept. How did he keep getting jobs? I ask you. Then Game 7 hits. McNamara decides to start Bruce Hurst on 3 days rest over Oil Can Boyd. The decision really upset Boyd. He went out drinking and he was unavailable for Game 7. Bad job by Boyd. But he was a character. You gotta keep him a little happy. Hurst, to his credit, pitched well for 5 innings of Game 7. But then, in the 6th, it all fell apart. He gave up 3 runs. He allowed the Mets to tie it at 3, and then the bullpen blew it. Schiraldi was inept. Al Nipper was inept. And those decisions that McNamara made cost the Red Sox a World Series. It wasn't Buckner. Buckner never should have been out there in the first place. After that, McNamara stayed as Red Sox manager for 1.5 more seasons. They finished under 500 in 87, and in 88 he was canned. He went to the Indians afterwards, only lasted 1.5 seasons, similar results. Then he was interim manager of the Angels in 1996. Did nothing. Like I said, terrible manager. It's just that simple. Tomorrow I'm going to recap the 2 NBA games. The NBA is finally back. Gonna be so much fun. I'll probably do Decades of Dumbass Decisions. I don't want to promise it, but I do want to get it done before next week. Maybe I'll finish it up tomorrow. I don't know what the future holds. But until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that Jacob deGrom is the unluckiest pitcher I've ever seen. He always picks the night to pitch when his team doesn't score any runs.